Hi, this is Adam Feinberg, and you are listening to Harlem Stories. And today we are joined with our co-host, Mark Becker.
How's everyone doing?
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Mark, today. And we are, today we're going to talk about, some fun things to do if you're, got a day or an afternoon, to kill and, want to go up into northern Manhattan. We're going to come up with some, interesting tips of, possible things you could do to keep you busy, have a good time, enjoy. So we're going to start off with, along the Hudson River. We're imagining this tour on the west side, closer along to the Hudson River area. We'll start off with going from south to north, and we'll start off with the north end of Morningside Heights. In that, we've got our first stop for this theoretical tour afternoon day of fun uptown, Socorro Park and Grant's Tomb. Socorro Park, and I think it's most worth noting this as a side note. It's two smaller sites that are just a couple-minute walk from luxury new constructions, Vanderwater, Claremont Hall. So I recommend anyone considering these two buildings to also check out these two spots in Socorro Park, and Grant's Tomb. Socorro Park is a tiny 2-acre park. It was built as an extension to Riverside Park on land the city bought from John D. Rockefeller. You go back to a lot of these sites in New York City, Rockefeller donated a lot to New York City. The park was renamed Socorro Park, Socorro meaning cherry blossom in Japanese, for the more than 2,000 cherry trees presented as a gift from the Committee of Japanese Residents of New York as part of the Hudson Fulton celebration in 1909, which actually commemorated the 100th anniversary of Robert Fulton's steam-powered boat on the Hudson River and the 300-year anniversary of the Henry Hudson's discovery and exploration of the area. Many of the original trees that were being shipped over from Japan, they went down with the boat from Japan during a storm, and unfortunately that did not happen. But ultimately, there was a new shipment of trees that arrived in New York City in 1912, planted in both Riverside and Socorro Parks. Typically, the best time of the year to visit Socorro Park is going to be early April when the cherry trees blossom, and it's only about a 2-week window to view. So the second site that's just about a block away or so, not even, is Grant's Tomb. It's General Grant's National Memorial. It's located at Riverside Park around 122nd Street. The architecture is absolutely amazing, neoclassical, modeled after the mausoleum of Halicarnassus in Turkey. It's two rows of thick Doric columns at the front of the memorial, topped with a huge round cupola. The intricate carvings and paintings depicting crucial monuments during the Civil War are drawn stunningly beautiful. And the tomb itself is in the basement where Ulysses S. Grant and his wife permanently rest. So the common question that you always hear in trivia, who's buried in Grant's tomb? Well, it's Grant and his wife, Julia. So there's also a visitor center across the street from the National Parks Department, and they'll help answer any question. Absolutely stunning, architecture and paintings. Definitely worth stopping in if you're touring for a day. It's not a long trip, but certainly absolutely beautiful. Something interesting to see.
Yep.
Going just a few blocks north over there is Viaduct Valley, or which is part of Columbia's new campus in Manhattanville, called Viaduct Valley because of the Riverside Drive Viaduct, and this is beneath it. Stunningly beautiful, and actually captured in so many TV and movie and commercials. So you'll see a lot shot over there, in terms of film. So if you're walking along Riverside Drive from Grant's Tomb along Riverside Drive the roadway begins to feel a little bit more like highway, and you're on an elevated stretch from 123rd to 135th Street looking down and east. You'll see Columbia's new campus expansion, which is the Manhattanville campus. And we've talked about that in episodes previously over here. But in case you haven't heard those episodes, Columbia purchased much of that land in Manhattanville west of Broadway, approximately 20 acres, so rather significant for Manhattan. You'll see all the new buildings in the first phase of their new campus have either been completed or are currently under construction. And Columbia hasn't yet announced what they plan on doing with Phase 2, as much of the land still hasn't yet to be redeveloped. And what we've seen over here, it was Phase 1 was 5 original buildings. They kind of added that residence on 125th and Broadway, the corner over there where the drive-up McDonald's used to be.
Yeah.
Well, apparently there will be a McDonald's in the new building, but it's not going to have the drive-through anymore. So still only a couple
There go the property values.
Yeah.
No drive-through, no dice.
There's only a few drive-throughs remaining in Manhattan, and I think most of those...
Are there any?
Yeah, there's at least a McDonald's drive-through in the 130s on Adam Clayton Powell.
I know that one.
Yeah, it's near the Rennie, but I think it's like a block or two south, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I actually know exactly where it is because our nanny lives up there. It's 140th and I want to say 140th and Lenox.
It would definitely be Adam Clayton, but maybe you're right on the 140th part.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah.
Well, that's just a block over Adam Clayton.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
So, there's at least that one. I'm not quite sure. I think there was at least one other. I just can't remember off the top of my head. But drive-up fast food places in Manhattan are almost entirely gone.
Few and far between.
Yeah, exactly. So Columbia going back to Columbia, even though they're putting the McDonald's back in place. That is all that we know about that. Phase 2, there's still a lot of undeveloped land over there. They haven't announced publicly what they plan on doing with that. And we'll probably talk a little bit more about some of Columbia's plans in future episodes as well as a past episode. But, moving on a little bit over here, looking further east from that elevated stretch, West Harlem Piers is the West Harlem Piers Park. It's located on the Hudson River. It's space to relax along the Hudson, fishing. There's a canoe launch. And at one point there was, and I haven't heard about anything about this recently, space for a commuter ferry launch. It's at the northern end of the park exists a space that was once used as a train station. And that possibility exists today, as Metro North has mentioned this a few times. They had all the connections in place for the changes for Grand Central and Penn Station, and assuming that they can, make it a go, is that possibly could be a Metro North station once again. So and there were a bunch of restaurants in that building that were struggling. It was kind of pretty isolated, but now with Columbia campus starting to really ramp up, maybe there's a chance for restaurants reopening there again. Underneath this elevated stretch of Riverside, if you walk along Riverside and walk down the downward stretch over here, it's leave you near the 125th Street Cotton Club and Dinosaur Barbecue, as well as the Viaduct. And odds are, and I mentioned this before, odds are some of your favorite TV and movies have been shot under the Viaduct. It's definitely a unique vibe, and it's definitely worth taking a look at, because I guarantee you one of your favorite shows was probably filmed there at some point.
Yeah.
More recently, that space under the Viaduct has been allocated for the Harlem Night Market, where local vendors come up and set up a table or a food truck. So, a lot going on there. Anyway, so that gives you a good sense of that as a second site, going up. Let's move a little further north and talk about Riverbank State Park. And I'm actually going to have a whole episode on Riverbank, so, we'll just briefly mention now as an point of interest over here.
We'll just wet the palate.
Yeah, exactly. Wet the palate. Riverbank is just one of 3 state parks in Manhattan. Entrances are at 137th Street and Riverside, as well as 145th Street in Riverside. And the park facility is located along the bank of the Hudson River. In total, it's about 28 acres. Again, that's a pretty large stretch for Manhattan. It's the only structure of its kind in the Western Hemisphere. So the park is actually built on top of a water treatment plant, and it's elevated about 69 feet above the Hudson River. And the park opened in 1993. So,
and for people who haven't been there, it's not super, unless you live in the neighborhood. It's not super easy to get to, but there's so much stuff to do there. You could really make a day of it.
Yeah, I've actually had plenty of clients. They said, living on like the Upper West Side or Chelsea, trying to grow up and raise kids on a budget. It seems like a lot of the parents actually are pretty well familiar with when I take them up here, Riverbank State Park, because, a lot of their kids wind up having soccer matches or, football events or,
Sure.
all sorts of sporting
Tennis.
things. So, yeah, I mean, the park has got an Olympic-sized swimming pool. It's covered skating rink, roller and ice, depending on which time of year. 800-seat cultural theater, 2,500 seat athletic complex there's a fitness room, 400-meter running track, 150-seat restaurant, community gardens, and it's just, it keeps going on and on. Horticultural learning lab, there's dedicated space for a football and soccer field, baseball, tennis, basketball, handball, and there's so much more. There's also a seasonal kiddie carousel. On the days that I personally want to decompress, and I live near Riverbank, you can sometimes find me on that path within the park along the waterfront, just gazing out there into the Hudson. And recently, the Hudson River Greenway connecting bicycle and walking trails on the Hudson is beside the highway, and it's to the side beneath the elevated structure of the park. So it makes things easy to connect to, whether you're walking or biking, taking those trails. Great opportunity to have a lot of fun. Lots of sporting events, lots of things to see and do. I've actually seen Shakespeare in the parking lot perform there.
That's cool.
So, moving along on our day, we're going to go to our 4th site. Not far from there, and it's City College, and we've talked about it a little bit in previous episodes and future episodes, I'm sure, which is approximately 140th down to about 130th, but the historic buildings in the campus is in the northern section from 135th to 140th. So if you're walking along Riverbank State Park and you exit out the 145th Street exit of Riverbank State, and you're walking, take 145th Street, a few avenues to Convent Avenue, and toward the amazing historic district along Convent, down to 140th Street, and you'll have the gates of City College directly in front of you. So it'll give you
beautiful area, very interesting area.
Yeah, and the townhouse on the southeast corner of 144th, it's worth pointing out as well, and Convent Avenue, it was the home used in the movie The Royal Tenenbaums, and in the movie it was supposedly Archer Avenue. And, from what I understand, some of the behind-the-scenes editorial that they were discussing the movie is actually they didn't have a script for the movie until they actually found the house, and they centered the script around the house. So fascinating story. In fact, the owners of that townhouse, interestingly enough, it was bought at a foreclosure auction. It was at that point, and this is far enough back, I'm not worried about it, but back in those days, it was originally being used as a crack den. The owners, I want to say, I don't remember what they paid for it, but I want to say it was closer into the $250,000 range at that point, or somewhere in that neighborhood. But amazingly enough, when the film crew contacted them, they had just purchased it. They hadn't moved in yet. So when the film crew contacted the new owners, they agreed to do this, and the revenue that they took in from offering the house for filming almost paid pretty much entirely for the house. So, they got lucky. Today, last I heard, it was being used as an art gallery. The owners are artists, so they were using it that way. But walking around, just going a few blocks more south, walking around the College's city campus, the stone was all hyper-local, and it was taken from the excavation of the New York City subway system. Recently released episode you can enjoy, just walking around the campus, and there's more than 1,000 gargoyles and grotesques sculpted into the facade of the buildings.
Gargoyles.
And there is a difference between them. Gargoyles are the ones that are actually used as a real put-to-work feature on the exterior. They're meant to drain water away from the building, whereas grotesques are just simply beautiful architectural detail.
They're not grotesque.
No, they're not. Actually, some are, some aren't. But it all depends, and that's an interesting component of what you look at over at City College. Yeah, so, the grotesques are just purely ornamental. And I know there was this movie scout that used to live in New York. I don't think he, lives here anymore. But he called the campus Hogwarts of Manhattan, which I think is a very fitting space. And TV shows often label the campus as the fictional Hudson University, where there's always some sort of crime. Or I think in a couple of the shows, it's just used as a substitute for Columbia. It might be just easier to film.
Makes sense.
So, City College, it's been the alma mater to more Nobel laureates than any other school. In its prime, and I want to say roughly around the 1950s or so, maybe the 40s included over there, kids that were admitted to Harvard waited until they received a letter from City College. That's how prestigious the school was. Today, there's been recently added a medical program and 2 new science center buildings, and it's just a couple avenues away from Columbia's new science center. So, certainly one of the reasons why I considered buying, in Upper Manhattan was, I saw that, City College was, at that point it was just plans. Now it's reality. But City College was, was planning spending about $500-600 million adding these 2 new science centers, and then, you had Columbia, looking to spend $6 to $7 billion into the area. And I was thinking, like, this is kind of reminding me of what happened over at MIT when they expanded their campus and they added all these biotech research companies and incubators, to the space. And that's exactly what's happened here is you've had Harlem Biospace that has been expanding in the area, and the Tasty building nearby as well. That's going to be a whole biomedical research facility. So, yeah, I was kind of right call on that, and I think, anybody that's considering these areas, it gives you, some additional thought of, like, all the investment that's happening up here. So, anyway, that gets a little far removed from our walk over here, but yeah, City College is is the fourth stop in our daily walk over here. And, since we're nearby, stop number 5, the last one for the day before maybe you head, back, further south or other areas, outside of the city perhaps. Right near City College campus is Alexander Hamilton's home, the Grange. We're walking backwards slightly to Convent and 141st Street, walking east down the hill about a block or so roughly. This is now the second time the house has moved, and it was moved in 2008 into St. Nicholas Park from around the corner on Convent Avenue. While the house is located in St. Nicholas Park, it's land that better reflects the openness of when Hamilton built his house, and it, just absolutely, awesome, because at that point it was considered living in the country. So now moving the house into the park kind of gives it that same kind of feel over here. The original location was somewhere around 310 Convent Avenue and 143rd, maybe a little further a little further west on Convent. So it gives you a sense, and I think there's a church right there today. But it was moved to accommodate the Manhattan street grid, which is ironic because the street grid uptown is broken up due to the many parks and elevations. Due to the the many parks and the extreme elevation differences. It was moved to Convent between 141st and 142nd Street, but it was pretty cramped over there, and it was moved in between an apartment building and a church. So that kind of gave you that sense. In 2008, the entire house was lifted above a portion of the church, and it was moved around the corner. It was a steep incline, but there is video out on that. This is actually the only house that Alexander Hamilton owned. He lived in the house for 2 years before he was killed in a duel by Aaron Burr, famously noted over there. Many years later, Burr's newlywed wife filed for divorce after just 4 months of marriage. And to rub a little salt in the wounds there, she hired Alexander Hamilton's son, Alexander Hamilton Jr., to handle her divorce. So certainly adding a little drama to that equation. But I think
funny how these things come full circle.
Yeah, exactly. These things are kind of crazy, and especially when you look how small these social circles were back then. Not that it's so wide today, because in Manhattan, it's so easy to find how we're interconnected to each other. But all right, great. So that gives you a kind of a cool day of a walking tour, and things of 5 things to do in Upper Manhattan if you want to spend a day out. Thank you for joining us at Harlem Stories, and we hope that you'll stay tuned for additional episodes.
All right. Thanks,
Bye.
Adam.